Hey everyone, and welcome to Listen Up. We got a brand new episode tonight, or rather today, and we got a very special guest with us as well. And I just want to check in with everyone. How is everyone doing? Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we hope that you guys have been so blessed by all the episodes that we've been releasing so far from Let's Get Real and Listen Up. Today is a very special topic. Today is a topic that is also very close to my heart, and I hope it's a topic that will be that will speak to many of you out there, because we're going to be talking about leadership in terms of how we approach leadership. And when it comes to Christian, right, we got this big label, we know, but when it comes to Christian leadership, how do we approach this topic? I believe all of us personally are leaders in one way or another, and as Christians, I also believe that we've all been called to be leaders, to leadership, and that is to lead the people in this world. But of course, being a leader is not easy, and all of us, we have doubts. Even I myself, I also have doubts when it comes to leadership and being a leader, and that is why today I got a very special guest with us to share with us more about this topic. I have a very, very good friend of mine. He is someone that I really admire and I look up to as well. And to me, when I look at him, he does exemplify leadership. Now, he is a priest within the Anglican Church. He pastors with Holy Trinity Bukit Bintang. He's also the COO of Alpha Asia Pacific. He does leadership development in both these areas of ministry. And he's also from the podcast on leadership, which you can find on HTBB. Not to forget as well, he's married to a beautiful wife, Jacinta, and they have a beautiful 2-year-old son, Levi. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time on the show, please welcome Mr. Abel Cheah.
Hey.
Hello.
Kind. What an intro, Brandon.
Thank you. And first of all, Abel, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show, right? It's been a long time coming, I feel, and I'm so happy that I finally get you on to join us today. And what better topic to talk about than leadership? Because you are, to me, you are a leader. You are an outright leader, and I can see that in you. But, to many people, I feel like you're very, very soft, you're very soft-spoken, you're very gentle, and there's a quiet confidence about you, and I actually really admire that. So I'm going to delve straight into it. Is that okay with you?
Can I just say quickly that, Brendan, we love you. We met recently, actually not too recent. It's been a while now, at Alpha conference that you spoke at. Yeah. And we just love you from that moment. Jacinta and I are huge admirers of you and Phoebe as well. And I just think you're so real. And we absolutely love that episode that you did with On Leadership recently as well. So check it out, everyone.
Yes, make sure you guys head on to HTBB's podcast as well. It's called On Leadership. Guess who's the host? We're talking to him right now. So yes, I'm on there as well. I really appreciate this partnership that we have with one another. And I had a very, very good time at Alpha as far as I can remember. So Abel, it's been lovely knowing you so far. And like I said, it's been a long time coming, this episode with you on leadership. So I'm going to delve straight into it. Let's dive straight into it, right? Now, when we talk about leadership, right, it's something that is something quite scary, because it's a big word, right? When you talk about leadership, you just can't help but think about a lot of stress. You can't help but think about a lot of responsibilities upon your shoulders. And let's start with maybe the world view of leadership, because when the world talk about leaders, we look to or we look for great examples, and we think about people such as presidents, successful businessmen. We look at CEOs and people of those sorts. Understandably, we're not saying today that these people are not great leaders, These people are also great leaders in their own rights. And the reason why I believe they're called great leaders is because they're measured by the world's standards. Of course, there are also Christians who occupy these top positions. We know many Christians are also CEOs, very successful entrepreneurs and businessmen. And my question is this, right? What are the main differences between the secular version of leadership and the Christian leader, if there is even any difference? And what are some of the markings that set these two group of people apart?
Yeah, such a great question, Brendan. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes leadership sounds super intense.
Right.
Like you have a certain picture of what a leader is, right? Like growing up, I always thought leaders look like Tun Mahathir, because all of us have lived through some era of Tun Mahathir, right? He's been around for a while. Or Lee Kuan Yew or Winston Churchill, just a certain profile. Like they tend to be very commanding, super authoritative, like everyone listens to them and they tell people what to do. So basically, boss, right? That was the picture that I had of a leader. That's someone who's a boss.
Yeah.
But, growing up, learning a little bit more about leadership and then being under amazing leaders myself, I realized that actually leadership is not what, you tend to sort of, you think of, especially, when you think of leadership as this authoritative, position that people hold. And that's a mistake, to think that simply leadership is telling people what to do. You ask, what's the difference between Christian leadership and maybe the leadership of the world? I think there's a perfect scripture in the Bible, Brandon, that talks about this, and it's actually found in Matthew 20. I won't read too much, don't want to preach to you and your audience, but if you remember that there is a part in that scripture where Jesus actually says to his disciples, he brings his disciples, they've just had a power argument, okay? They basically, two of his disciples wanted to be on his left and his right. So basically one position. And Jesus says to these disciples, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Their high officials exercise authority over them. But then he says these 4 words, not so with you. And then he blows their minds because he completely redefines what leadership is. He says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man came to serve. And so Jesus is basically saying there is a certain standard of leadership. The world tends to see leadership as lording over each other, telling people what to do, and sometimes leadership does involve giving direction, giving clarity. But it's not about exercising a top-down, sort of authoritative presence. It's more often about serving under. It's not about lording over, but serving under. Another way to think of it is, the world tends to think of leadership as the number one. You climb a ladder and you reach the top of the ladder. Yeah. But Christian leadership, the way that Jesus defines it, is you're not ladder climbing, you are ladder carrying. You're serving. And wow. it comes from this posture of serving rather than a position of power. So very, very different. And it's so different that you might notice Jesus doesn't even use this word leadership as he teaches his disciples. He uses the word service or servant. And that's a clue about what leadership looks like, in terms of how Christians lead.
Now, that is a very interesting thought there. And right off the bat, I think you just blew everyone's perception of leadership just right out the window, because you mentioned a few things there that I would say are very uncommon to the world standards of how the world view leadership to be, right? You mentioned earlier at the start as well, power, authority. They have some form of dominion, over, and a lot of things that they can lord over, and that gives them the title of lord or boss, or the title of being superior. And I think the example that he gave is very countercultural, whereby it's not lording over. I love that you mentioned it's not lording over, but serving under. And also one that you mentioned is leadership is a posture. It's not a position. Now, can you explain to me a little bit more? What does it mean that when you say leadership is a posture and not a position? Because it's kind of mind-blowing, to be honest with you. A lot of people think with position, you've been put at that place, then only you have that position, then you have the title of your leader. And now you're telling me leadership is a posture, not a position. So maybe you can just explain a little bit more. What do you mean by this?
Yeah. So Brendan, I spent a lot of my years growing up thinking one day I'll be a leader. Right. Almost as if there comes a point when someone allows you to be a leader, when you are elected into a position, or maybe, you win an election and, and you're appointed somewhere. But that's a false premise about leadership, because then you're thinking about leadership as a position. Like you can only arrive there once you are given a title. And that may be true, but that's such a small part of leadership. It's a very small reality. Leadership is a posture, on the other hand. So think of posture as literally, we all stand with a certain posture. When I was growing up, right, when I was young, I always was corrected by my parents because I had a hunchback posture, just horrible posture. And your posture is, basically your stance. It's your approach. It's how you come across. And if we've got a good posture, it's something that we can control. It's something that we carry with us, and we can correct it. It's just how you come across to people. Whereas a position is something that, you are given. It tends to be more of a title. A posture is how you come across.
Right.
And, I think leadership is a posture because you don't actually have to wait until you get a rank to lead. The true leaders often were already leading in some way, influencing other people, serving other people long before they got their title. So don't get me wrong, leadership does come with some amount of authority, but the biggest mistake we can make, Brandon, is to wait until we get the title before we start leading. So I just want your listeners today to be empowered. Don't think of being a leader as, some distant time when finally you're given that position and now, you are the number one or number two of your team. Some of the greatest leaders that we've ever seen in history, think about, the Mother Teresa's, the Nelson Mandela's, these were leaders long before they had their official titles. Even Jesus, greatest leader on earth. He wasn't, given some official title by the Roman Empire, the Messiah. In fact, actually, till his last day on earth, when he was even crucified, they mocked his title. They said, this is the King of the Jews. It wasn't an official title. They were mocking him. So he really didn't get the official title or the position, but yet he was the greatest leader on earth because he led with a posture of service.
Now, I love that you mentioned this as well, because you were appealing to our listeners as well. And this is good because the truth is a lot of our listeners are younger people. We're old, or maybe we're about the same generation. I know you're older than me, but a lot of our listeners, they're very young people. And a lot of them just, are just coming out to work, or some of them are maybe even teenagers, some of them are in school. Yeah. And I know we started off this conversation by talking about a lot of powerful people where we mentioned top management people, CEOs and successful businessmen. And naturally, these people also have some form of authority because, they are put in a position of leadership, like you said earlier. But the average viewer watching this right now may be saying, Abel, or Brandon, I don't have that kind of power, I don't have that kind of authority with me. And that gives rise to our question today, which is, it's titular as well, as how does one lead without power? You've mentioned leadership is a posture, not a position, and a lot of people who were not labeled as leaders were already leading without, from the very beginning. So, and these people had little to no title, little to no power that they realized. So for the average listener listening to this right now, they may be asking this question: how do I lead without power?
Such a good question. So good, Brandon. Well, like I said, I spent a lot of my growing up thinking that I will only be a leader once I am given power.
Right.
But that's such a bad way to think about leadership because that's not even true. The way that Jesus defines leadership here is if you serve, if you add value, if you extend your influence to other people, and you put other people above yourself, you prefer their needs over you, then you are actually adding value to them as a servant leader. So how do we lead without power? Now, the first thing I want to say is that most leaders led without power long before they were given power. So start practicing leading through influence first, through relational influence. And then one day, you might be given authority, but don't do it the other way around. It's much harder to, lead with authority first and then try to build relational influence. Let me give you a quick illustration. When I was, some years back, I had my nephew. He was about 2 years old, so my son's age now. He was living with me, and his name is Samuel. Super cute at 2 years old. He basically could talk a little bit already and he could tell who's boss. And he was living in my house, right? So, I thought that because I'm the homeowner and he's my guest, he would recognize my authority as the man of the house. Basically he's living in my house, right? But one day when I came back from work, I found Samuel in the kitchen with his parents. I opened the door, and the first thing that Samuel said to me when I opened the door was, "Hello, Auntie Abel." And I was like, "Samuel, I'm Uncle Abel." And then he says, "Okay, Auntie Abel." And then I was like, no, Samuel, get your uncles and aunties right. I am Uncle Abel. And he said, "Okay, Auntie Abel." Obviously, he was just teasing me, right?
Right.
But I was like, this guy is super cheeky, but I was learning something about that moment because here was a 2-year-old, obviously less power than me, I think. I had a lot more authority. Basically, he's living in my house. I could have kicked him out. I had all the power technically. But still, he was not influenced by me. And there is here a big difference between authority and influence. You might have authority, you might have a title, you might have a position, but we all know that there is a difference between a leader with a title and a leader who has truly won the trust and the influence of the people. We know that there's a big difference, between a leader who is like high and mighty and a leader you will always follow, right? And you trust. And I think that difference is influence. And so leadership is influence. I think that was one of the more popular quotes by John Maxwell. And as long as you have influence, you need to see yourself as someone of leadership. So how do you lead without power?
Right.
I think very quickly, just to simplify, there are really just two things that make someone an influential leader. There's so many definitions about what leadership is, and there are amazing quotes. But really, I think when it boils down to it, it comes down to two things. People that we see as leaders. So let me just pause and ask your viewers right now, think of the most influential leader that you trust in your life. I am willing to bet that, if you think hard enough, perhaps your first answer is not someone high and mighty with a title, but someone close to you. I often ask this question, and the most common answers I get would be my mother, my sister, my cell group leader, this uncle. Some people have even said, my teacher. And notice these are not necessarily high-powered people. They may have positions and authority, but what's common is that they are your most trusted and influential leaders because they have won something in you. They've won a trust. They've contributed something deep in you. They've invested in you, and in some way they have served you. So what is a leader? Two things. Someone who encourages someone and someone who solves problems. Just, very, very simple. We think of some of the best leaders as always being able to do these two things. They're always some of the greatest encouragers who invest hope in you. Some of these people that we are thinking of, in terms of our best leaders in our lives, they invested in us long before other people could see our potential. They saw greatness in us long before we could see any goodness in ourselves. So they are amazing encouragers. If you encourage someone, you're already a leader. But the second thing is they always solve a problem. There's always a gap. There's always a need. And that's what servants do. That's why Jesus defines the greatest leaders as servants. Because what do servants do? They're always meeting needs and they're solving problems. So it's not good to just be good. You've got to be good for something and you've got to add value. And so leaders encourage and they solve problems.
Wow, that is so good. I mean, wow, that like whole like 3-minute thing or 4-minute thing, that itself could be like, that is it already. That was like the I would say the brand's essence of chicken there. And that was fantastic, Abel. That was lovely to hear coming from you. Now, so you shared a little bit about, that leadership is about influence. It's not about authority, right? And leadership is someone that really you can trust and you will follow. You'll follow, definitely. And it gives rise to also another question where, how do you lead when, like you say, you're not in charge, right? When you're not, when there's people above you. Let's just put in a scenario here, because we are always under some form of authority, unless we really own the whole world or anything like that. But you asked me to be a leader, but there's actually a leader above me. There's someone put above me who has higher authority than me. So how do you lead under authority, or is it even possible? Can it be done? Yeah.
Again, such a good question. And, I think a lot of us are going through this all the time. In fact, one of my favorite leadership podcasts is the leadership podcast with Craig Groeschel. Huge podcast. I encourage you guys to listen to it too. And what's interesting is that in one of them, Craig Groeschel said, the most common question he gets on his podcast is, how do I lead under a bad boss?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, I might throw that question to you as well, if you don't mind answering that as well as an extension to what I asked. Yeah. How do you lead under a bad boss?
It's so related to the question you just asked, because like we all have leaders over us. Hopefully some of them are good leaders, but still we're under someone all the time. Even number ones are often under some form of authority. Maybe it's a board, maybe it's, the shareholders, etc. So we're always under someone. And if we're lucky, maybe that someone is a good leader. But actually, it's very common that a lot of us also lead under pretty difficult bosses. And some of you might feel like, my leaders right now, immediate leaders are my parents, and it's just tough. It's tough going. I don't agree with my parents, and they're just difficult bosses, difficult leaders to serve under. So what do I do, and how do I lead under difficult bosses who are setting the tone for maybe a culture I don't even agree in? I want to say, I think there are 3 things that you can do to lead when you're not in charge, or to lead when you don't have power. Remember, we're saying a leader is someone with influence. And so, you need to recognize your role here, that you're not a leader until you're given a position. You're already a leader if you have the posture to serve. And, we define serving as encouraging someone and adding value to someone. So solving a problem or meeting a need. So 3 things. I think the first one is very quickly lead yourself. The second one is initiate something. And the third one is to think how to add value to other people. So lead yourself, initiate something, and think how to add value to other people. And I think that the 3 of these things put together, they basically give you, a way to lead within your circle of influence. So think about a circle, right? And we all, think of influence like a circle, and we all have this circle of influence. Some of us, who are maybe a bit more experienced and who are given more leadership opportunities, your circle may be bigger. So maybe you're leading a Christian fellowship, a club or society. Maybe you're a president or, of some body or institution. So your circle of influence is pretty big. But the others of us, maybe we start with very humble and small circles, and yet they're still circles of influence. And always remember, some circles will never leave. In fact, they're always going to be deep and important circles for you, like your siblings or your parents. These circles will never leave you. At some seasons of our lives, our circles may be bigger, some of them may be smaller, but some circles will never go away. And these are the circles you want to always be aware of. But we all have a circle of influence. And the first thing to do when you want to lead without power is to first lead yourself. Leading yourself is actually probably the hardest thing to do in your whole leadership journey. It's so easy actually to learn the skill of leading other people. There's so many books out there, but the hardest thing to do is often this element of leading myself, being self-aware, and then having self-control. It's not an accident that self-control is one of the fruit of the Spirit, right? Because we need the Holy Spirit to fill us and give us strength to sometimes save us from ourselves. We can be the hardest people to lead ourselves. So, start with yourself, be aware of your strengths, invest in your growth, have this posture of learning, think like a learner, never stop being a student, even if you have graduated from university. The first thing to do is to lead yourself and, make whatever circle of influence you have great. It might feel small. Maybe, you're some coochie rat in a very big company. Maybe you are an intern somewhere without much power. But whatever circle of influence you have, make that the greatest possible, because that's the first place you begin with. All the greatest leaders invested first in their circle of influence. And actually, it's a biblical principle, Brandon, to whom much is given, much is expected. But always, if you're faithful with the little, then you will be given many to take care of as well. So lead yourself. Second one, initiate something. So the extent of your influence will be dictated by how much initiative you take. So think about, how did you grow in terms of your opportunities to lead, and your influence. It's often that you and I did something to solve a problem, to initiate something that maybe perhaps other people are not even willing to do, and yet you were willing to do it. So serving has to do with both willingness and ability. You've got to be willing. You've got to be the one who says, yes, I'll do it, when no one else does. And when you are able to initiate something when perhaps no one else wants to do, then you grow influence in that area. And then the third thing to do is think about how you can add value to other people. So leadership cannot be done in isolation. So the greatest leaders are often the ones who basically add the most value to other people. So I love this quote. One of my favorite leadership quotes is by this guy called Max Dupree. And he says this: the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. The last is to say thank you. But in between, the leader is a servant. And everything about that gives you this idea that leadership is about relationship. It's about, just making someone else's life better. And if you can add value to them, if you can make their job a little bit easier, if you can encourage them and lift them up, then you've done something, to grow influence, but also to serve other people in your leadership.
Wow, Abel, you're dropping so many nuggets of wisdom here, and I'm personally as well, I'm learning so much from you as well, and I'm sure all our listeners are definitely being just enriched by all your experience and what you're sharing right now. Now, we've talked a lot about, of course, the theory part about leadership, and you've also shared, there are a lot of people who inspire you to be a better leader each and every day. Maybe you can share with us, is there someone in specific that has just come across your mind where when you think about a leader and who exemplifies all these qualities that you just shared? Is there anyone in mind?
Yeah, definitely. So without a doubt, one of the greatest leaders in my life is this guy called Minsa. And, sadly, he has passed on. But he was actually the one who drove me to church. When I was young, when I first went to youth group in my church, he was the one who would take me to church every Saturday. Wow. And he was about 6-7 years older than me. But when you're 13 and there's another fella who's 6-7 years older than you, you feel like they're completely light years away from you. Like, what do they have to do with me, right? They're thinking about university, they're dating, I'm this coochie rat. He's got nothing to do with me. And yet, Minsa did two things for me, Brandon. He drove me to church, so he met a practical need, and he invested in me, not in a very intense way, like, Abel, here's a scripture every week for you. Not in anything intense like that. But he was just interested in me. He would ask me questions like, how are you doing? Later on when I went to Form 5 and I was supposed to sing a song at prom, like, he helped me to, do the -1 recording for that. So just those random thing while he was already working and he had his own life, he just took a very practical interest in me. And, when Minsa passed away, so many people were heartbroken, guys like me, girls in the youth group, because Minsa had invested in so many people in these simple ways, drove them to church, met a practical need, but also just took an interest, a personal interest in them. And just by doing that, and of course, he was an incredible teacher and he was a lot of things to many people. But the one common denominator was he just met practical problems. He just met needs. And he was just an encourager.
And he wasn't like a pastor. He wasn't like a deacon or anything, or an elder. No.
No, so it's funny that you say that because, years ago, I really miss Minsa now and then. I still think about him. His impact on my life is really deep. So, and especially now that I have a 2-year-old son, I think about him because he passed away around the same age that I am right now. And, a few years ago, I was thinking of him and then I Google searched him, right, on Google, typed his full name there, and I couldn't find much about him, Brendan. And that's the interesting lesson about the great leaders in our lives. They may not even be recognized on Google. You may struggle to find many search hits about them, but they leave an impact in you and for the rest of your life because they've done something personal for you. They've solved the problem. They've encouraged you. They've called out greatness in you when you couldn't see good in yourself.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a beautiful story. And I'm so glad you shared that with us, Abel. Thank you so much for sharing that part and about your friend as well. Now, we are slowly running out of time, but we still have time for a few more questions, if you don't mind, Abel. I want to ask you this personal question as well, because, I see you as a leader. And of course, when I'm talking to you now, I see this, wow, you're so inspiring, you're so encouraging as well. And by just sharing all these stories and all these nuggets of wisdom, you're also meeting the needs of many people who are listening. But let's focus on the flip side of the coin here a little bit, right? Let's flip the coin a little bit and talk about the times when it's not so great, right? And there are times like this. What about those times when we feel tired? What about those times when we feel empty inside? When we don't want to lead anymore? Is there such a thing for a Christian to say, hey, I'm built to be a follower. You know what? I prefer to be a follower instead. That's maybe my calling, I'm good being a follower instead. So 2 parts to this question. Is there such a thing as that? Number 1. And number 2, what about those times when really you yourself also feel tired, you feel empty, I don't want to lead anymore? Yeah.
Well, the first thing to say is that in Christian leadership, all great leaders are great followers. And so there's no dichotomy here. And actually, if as a leader you struggle to be a follower, there's something wrong within your leadership. So you need to actually search deep, within your leadership and ask, actually, do I struggle to take, authority, figures? Do I struggle to follow? Because all great leaders are often very good followers as well. Why? Because an essential part of leading is listening. And if you can't listen well, actually your leadership will meet this limit, this cap to, your potential, and definitely the potential of other people as well. So, but you also asked, Brandon, what if, as a leader, I get so tired and I just go, okay, I'm done with these responsibilities and I just want to go with the flow. I just want to follow someone else. And there are many reasons, why we might come to that place. But I want to say, one of the biggest reasons why you and I might be demotivated. Yes, physically, sometimes we're tired. So take a break, don't quit. Some of the best advice I've received is when you're tired, don't quit. Just take a break, go for a holiday. And, through that holiday, you may realize that I was just physically tired. Take a nap. That's the most spiritual advice I've ever gotten. Just go and take a nap. But, beyond physical exhaustion, which is very valid, maybe one of the reasons why sometimes as leaders we get demotivated is because we have lost our anchor, our big reason why. Because we have lost the plot somewhere, and lost some focus. So I want to encourage you, recenter and go back to, your first love. Like what is the first love here in this responsibility that you have? Sometimes when I struggle with motivation, I don't force myself even more to chong and do it. I ask myself the question, who is counting on me in order for me to bring my best? And the reason why is because you are most motivated by what you love.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't sound very profound. Like, of course, I'm motivated by what I love. But really, like, you and I will always be motivated when we have someone we love in the picture there. So, I this past 2 years, you and I, we've had some serious leadership challenges. It's been a very difficult time for many people. Yeah. And on some of the hardest leadership challenges, moments that I've had, I have always asked myself, okay, so the job is really tough. The challenge is like insurmountable. It's really, really difficult. I'll go back to the one question of, so what will it take, for Levi to be proud of his dad in this moment? Like, who's counting on me to be my best here? And I realized that often my answer is not about the job itself. It's not about the thing I need to do. We often think like it's a thing we need to do. It's about the people. Like, it's all about, the first love for why you got there in the first place. So beyond the job, which is the challenge, think about the team that you're serving with. Think about, your loved ones that you don't want to let down because you want to model something good to them. Think about the end people that you're serving. You're doing it for them. And, don't ever lose that focus. If you're serving in an organization and you've got a lot of things to do, recenter on the why, which is the people. Ultimately, it's the people that you want to serve. And there are some practical things about how you can recenter on the people. Like, take a day to talk to the people, in your organization. Ask them, how has it been for you? Just take an active interest in the people that you're trying to serve. And then remember to put the human element in front of you.
Wow. That's fantastic, Abel. I mean, you're speaking to me on so many levels as well, let me just tell you. And you're also really encouraging me and my spirit man inside. So I've really, truly enjoyed this conversation with you. Now, before I let you go, Abel, slowly running out of time here, but what is one thing that, you want people out there to know about being a leader, and also to put in a Christian context as well? What is one thing you would like people to know about Christian leadership?
Yeah. It's all about love. So Christian leadership is all about being centered and rooted in love. And if you are able to love, to serve, that's leadership, essentially. The Bible says if you give your body up for charity, if you can speak in angelic tongues, if you can do all the weirdest and wildest things, but you don't have love, there's no point. And essentially, the heart of the Christian leader is to simply love well. And if you can love well, you're a great leader.
Wow, that is absolutely lovely. I'm so touched by your answers. I don't know why. But I'm very, very touched by the answers because it really helps me to also recenter and refocus and to always remember the reason why we do what we do. It's about the people, and the root of it is love, and that's how Jesus led us as well, by demonstrating his love for us. And out of that is the source that we can also lead in love. So I absolutely love this. Abel, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I know I'm blown away right now, and to all of you who are listening as well, I hope you've definitely, I'm sure that you've taken something of value today. And to those of you who are listening, we hope that you have also enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed this, of course, do share it with your friends. You can share it with a cell group, your church members. If you're looking for a community that you want to join as well, fun people to hang out with and to do life with, you can join our Discord community. The links are in the description below. Be sure to follow us as well. Don't forget you can follow On Leadership as well. We'll leave the links in the description below. You can see Abel. You can also hear from how he talks about other, I'm sure he has many other topics on leadership as well. So there is a podcast there for you to follow as well. So be sure to follow us on our social media platforms. We've got Instagram, YouTube, Spotify. You can stream us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts as well. Abel, any last words? Go for it. Any last words? You want to talk about On Leadership also can. Go for it.
No, I just want to say thank you, Brandon, for all that you do to the community, to serve so many people. So many people look up to you. And, on behalf of your listeners and your fans, we just want to say thank you for who you are, for the man that you are. We love watching you and Phoebe and, all that you share to us so vulnerably as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Abel. That means a lot to me as well. So yes, guys, we're going to leave you guys to it then. Be sure to follow us as always. I've learned so much today. So thank you again, once again, Abel, for being on the show with us. We'll see you guys again next time. God bless. Bye-bye. This has been Listen Up with me and Abel Cheah. Bye-bye.